Okay, so dear participants, ladies and gentlemen, we are very happy to continue with the second block of the fourth day. And with us is Rima I was rehearsing, I'm sorry, Povilioniene.
Yes, yes, it's okay. Only the accent should be on Povilioniene.
Povilioniene.
Yeah.
Thank you. So she will present Microdimensional Shaping of Glissando, music composing from accurate calculation to sophistication of microtonal canon. Mrs. Rima, Mrs. Rima is faster, has a PhD in musicology, full-time professor at the Department of Music Theory of the Lithuanian Academy of Music and Theatre, assistant editor-in-chief of the yearly Lithuanian Musicology, an editor at the Lithuanian National Philharmonic. She held a researcher position at the International Semiotics Institute and at the Center for Science at the LAM. Rima had internships at the Institute of Musicology at Leipzig University in 2004, IRCAM 2012, and attended Eastman School summer courses in Paris, IRCAM 2019. She has been a guest lecturer at Leipzig University, the Tbilisi Conservatoire, thank you, the Belgrade University of Arts, the Vytautas Latvian Academy of Music, Vilnius University, and Kaunas University of Technology. She has edited over 15 collections and published more than 30 scientific articles and 150 critical reviews. She's an author of 4 monographs and research studies. Her monograph Musica Mathematica in Lithuania 2013 was awarded for the best musicology work of the year. She's an editor of 2 collections for Springer in 2017 and 2019. The latter co-edited with Nick Zampil and Ruta Staneviciute. I know her very well, I'm sorry, Ruta. Of Essence and Context Between Music and Philosophy, Springer 2019. Please, very welcome, Microdimensional Shaping of Glissando.
Thank you, Augustine, for presentation, and many thanks for inviting me to present my report here. Also, I was very kindly surprised when looking at the program of the website. I saw the links below my name for the contacts. These are my passions for the dogs and for pipe organs. So thank you, Augustine, that you inserted that links. Yeah, so this shows that musicology is only one of the occupations in my life. I also enjoy many other things. So now I would like to share my slides, and I would like to present my report on Lithuanian music and some microdimensional aspects in contemporary compositions. So recently I completed a 3-year research of Lithuanian contemporary microtonal music that may be regarded as simultaneous response to the worldwide practice. And at the same time, I approached to some cases in Lithuanian music with the reference to minimalistic practice as well. Nearly 30 years ago, in 1991, the Perspectives of New Music journal initiated a fruitful discussion dedicated to the questions of microtonality in today's music. And the editor of this forum, Douglas Keisler, then raised a question: why the interest in new tunings? So let me reinterpret this original question by Douglas Keisler and to say why the interest in microtones. Evaluating the context, Keisler noted that the interest in microintervals links to the sphere of minimalism. Non-standard tunings offer a means to breathe new life into minimalism. It is well known that the focus on microtones regained the attention already in the beginning of the 20th century, and we noticed the increasing dissatisfaction with the limited possibilities of Western major-minor system, the turn of music processes towards abandonment of form and melody, the revision and extension of the diatonics, as well as the use of non-tone paired scales and microintervals. The music creators started to talk about exhaustion and tiredness of the 12-tone system. At that time, Ivan Vishnegradsky in his famous manual on quarter-tone music recorded his statement that quarter-tone is the future and basis of the modern music. Even some years later, Vishnegradsky's contemporary Charles Ives in 1925 announced that even in the limited and awkward way of working with quarter tones at present, transcendent things may be felt ahead, glimpses into further fields of thought and beauty. However, experiencing more than 100 years of intense creative attention, the generalization of microtonal composing still remains under consideration. Today, the description of non-12-tone music is reflected in different concepts and attempts to systematize it because, first, of highly individualized technological as well as each composer's aesthetic attitude, and second, of the diversity in application of different tunings based on such aspects as microtonal relationships, different divisions, and acoustical properties of the harmonic series. To explain the transformations and changes in 12-tone music starting at the beginning of the 20th century, American composer and musicologist Julia Barnes has proposed a concept A12 systems. I would present a pair opinions that represent a different starting point. For example, Julia Barnes distinguishes two general ways of microtone integration, a simply expansion and a more elaborated rejection or correction of the established 12-tone equal temperament. I would assign the approach by Julia to the most common focus in microtonal music, the focus on music interval and the division of the octave. On the opposite, Lithuanian composer Rytis Mažulis puts forward the creative intention. He points out that the composer who decides to deal with microtones in his composition should first make a choice whether he is going to use microtones as a decorative tool or as a structural element. Extending the latter observation by Mažulis, I would like to provide a summary how microtones manifest in nowadays Lithuanian music. I would distinguish two ways that are supplementing each other. The first one would be non-systematic or earlier mentioned decorative, coloristic approach. It may include ornamentation or inflection of traditional tones, pitches, creating effects close to, for example, a traditional trill or vibrato. Also, it could be a multiplication of unison when the main tone is surrounded by its doppelgangers, so to say, that is secondary tone pitches, yet attributed to the main tone field, deviate from the central tone by distance smaller than semitone. Also, microtones may be used emphasizing transition, inserting additional pitches in between the semitones and thus creating an effect of smooth and sleek glissando. Also, it could be an aspiration for detuned or non-clear or even false harmony, creating unclear chords seeking to escape from still potent remnants of classical tradition. And also it could be a purpose of stylization in certain tones, pitches typical for non-Western harmonies. For example, Orient scales and tunings. And the second way would be systematic approach, that is earlier mentioned constructive structural approach by Mažulis, and I have in mind a particular type of logic and a system that is applied to the whole musical work. In this way, microinterval technique determines the whole form of the composition. Microtonal architecture serves as an initial idea for the overall concept. And this can be achieved using the following, like employment of a certain scale that already exists or is specially designed and consists of microtonal relationships. Also, it could be an application of certain tuning based on or with added microtones. Also, it could be an application of glissando phenomena that would be an overall model. And that is the principle of glissando in parallel to certain compositional rules, which determines the whole structure of the composition. And also it could be an adaptation of an all-encompassing composing system, combining different parameters and creating a microdimensional network. I will focus more in detail on the glissando phenomena as overall model and on the last one, all-encompassing composing system. But first, I would like to make a short talk about Lithuanian context, microintervals in Lithuanian music. I would distinguish two periods talking about the composers who work with microtones, two main periods, but also all of them may be divided in smaller periods as well. So the first one would be the interwar period, when the Lithuanian music panorama, we had a bright example of Johannes Kotschy, who continued the path of Czechian composer Alois Haba. Kotschy is regarded the first figure of microtonal music in Lithuania, and he composed one of the earliest examples of Lithuanian avant-garde music. However, Kotschy's intentions were cancelled by the Second World War. He was forced to emigrate, and none of Lithuanian composers then had followed or took over his microtonal experiments. But starting from the 70s, I would pick out a new outset that was rather a response to the display of avant-garde concepts in music in general in the world. But looking from nowadays, I would distinguish two directions of microtonal manifestation that I would describe: decorative and structural tool approach that I already commented. And further, I would like to present some examples from the recent decades, and finally concentrate on Juste Janulytė and Rytis Mažulis cases. A characteristic feature of sound effect may be presented by middle generation composer Marius Baranauskas. Mostly, he in his music is preoccupied with the new ways to extend the limits of imagination by translating words into music sounds and timbres. He is particularly concerned with timbre as one of the primary elements of his musical language. A typical example of such technique was a composition Talking that was composed in 2002 and was awarded the third prize at prestigious Toru Takemitsu competition. But regarding the microinterval technique, Baranauskas has noted that he most often applies an expansion and like swelling of the single tone unison, thus creating an out-of-tune harmony. For example, in his choral piece Templum Dei Estis, The composer expands the unison using the microtones above and below of the certain tone, and the first page of the score shows that while one group of altos sing a true or right tone A, the second group of singers raise the tone in a quarter tone, while the tenors sing a quarter tone lower, thus creating an effect of impurer sound. The case of Onute Narbutaite is rich in the variety of microtonal effects. This Lithuanian composer is marked by a wide range of subtle nuances and refined moderation. One of the recent works by Onute is a composition for the worldwide project by Kronos String Quartet, 50 for the Future. A piece, Just Strings and a Light Wind Above Them, stands out as a refined catalogue of sliding harmonies and different glissandos implemented by the strings. Talking to the composer about microtonal elements in her music, and particularly in this composition, she mentioned several techniques to which she applies microtonal accidentals, such as glissando, vibrato sul portincello, trills, or playing behind the bridge. Further, I would focus on a case by Juste Januilite. This composer quite often writes for the same type of instruments, like only cellos, only voices, only saxophones, only flutes. Thus, her music is titled monochromatic. As composer states, the use of the same instruments provides the possibility to concentrate on the purity of sound and its movement. Therefore, the microtonal vibrations, sliding glissandos, become the main element of the composition that I would distinguish as a background of the overall structure. A composition Radiance for choir and electronics presents the constant use of microtonal lines that determine the overall form of this 30-minute composition. The graphic image shows the visual expansion of two initial tones that is compared to the image of nuclear explosion. According to Juste, the inspiration was taken from the nuclear explosion, and in the music, the strict process of this explosion determined the structure of the composition a priori. The implemented compositional technique presents a double glissando effect. At the beginning, the choir sings two different tones that soon start to be expanded both up and down. An exciting project of sunglasses for 4 cellos, live electronics, video, and installation has toured all over the world in major contemporary music festivals, and this composition provides another example of microtonal sound that is created by 4 cellos sliding down. The overall composition idea may be presented in a simple chart of descending lines. Graphic example shows the gradual glissando as all 4 cellos move downwards. The sounding harmonies produce very subtle nuances of tones and gradual imperceptible transition downwards the scale until the low tone C. And if we look at the score of Sunglasses, there are no microtonal accidentals as well. And also there are no microtonal accidentals in Radiance as well. However, the result of sliding voice, singing, or cello playing is implemented not in semitones, but in rather smaller intervals. And now I would like to present you a video from Sunglasses. This is a promotion movie that is condensed in 5 minutes, as the composition lasts much longer. But this promotion video presents how all this overall glissando effect is achieved from the very high pitches moving down to the low C.
Excuse me, Rima, is it playing already?
Yes,
We didn't hear anything.
you didn't hear. I shared the sound, but did you see the video?
Yes,
And no sound.
no sound.
I shared the sound, and this should be shown for you.
Or maybe what do other people say in the chat? Okay, can you play it again, please? If somebody hears, please, can you let us know, please?
Okay, I will start again.
Thank you.
I see an error.
You hear?
I see only the Microsoft Office error message and no video, no sound.
Yes, of course, yeah, the video didn't start, yeah.
Interesting. I make this as usually, so something is wrong. Maybe I will go further because probably something is not right. But anyway, I may share the link of this video with you, and you may listen in your own computers. Yes.
Please,
so later after the presentation, I will share. So as it is really interesting to listen and also to see how it is happening, because not only music but also the video, the installation, all these effects, they are really fascinating. So moving further, I will talk about ritus majulis. The use of microintervals is a distinct feature of ritus majulis creation starting from the 80s and 90s already. According to Lithuanian musicologist Germanavicius, the microdimensional concept is the most suitable for majulis style. Majulis' fascination with tone division started with whole tone scales and superimposed thirds. Later, he turned to the microworld, and a variety of semitone fractions should be highlighted that the use of microtonals is a distinct feature in majulis creation and covers a wide range of elements. And these elements would be mechanical repetition of microtones, obsessive use of Canon techniques, high level of complexity and density through the use of microtones, complicated isorhythmic patterns and polytemporal ratios, impression of chaos created out of diligently constructed and simple order, and a composition derived from a single melodic pattern or even one note. Due to a very complicated and strict score, majulis reduces the personality of the performer to an almost mechanical state. And here is a very condensed list that provides a rich variety of microtone examples in the music by ritus majulis. He uses microtones in very tiny quantities, example only 3.3 cents, or he uses the quarter tone series, microtones of 20 cents, and so on. The very bright examples are compositions like Sibylla for mixed choir, also Ayapayapam for 12 voices, string quartet and electronics. In 2000, composed Canon Mensurabilis for 6 instruments, a vocal composition Cum Essem Parvulus, according to the Latin text from the New Testament, and like Schisma for 14 flutes. For example, Sibylla, composed in 1996, for mixed choir or 12 voices was commissioned by Lithuanian Contemporary Music Festival Gaida. Sibylla is an endless canon moving in round like Mažulis' other spiral canons. As you may see on the slide, composer arranged an one-page score that shows a spiral moving. The initial motif microtonal envelopes the central tone. Then the motif is transposed in a sequence upwards and downwards from the tones of a wide key diatonic scale. By using the consistent timbral progression, Mažulis shapes a palindrome of variable density. I will try to play also this composition and let me know, do you hear it? So now I will go further to one of the recent compositions by Rytis Mažulis, Solipsė for 1 live cello and 31 pre-recorded samples, or also it was intended for 32 live cellos. The structure of this composition builds up, let's say, an image of multidimensional glissando. And this composition brightly presents the microtonal divisions and Canon technique and a very sophisticated approach by Mažulis in his music. This composition features quite interesting structure and construction that is very thoroughly in detail calculated, or how to say, already foreseen by composer in advance, and all the components are very strictly arranged. For example, a polytemporal effect is achieved by gradually slowing down the tempo, and the strict slowing down is achieved taking off 1 second every next note. This means that the first note continues only 1 second, while the final note, numbered as 69, sounds for 10 minutes. Second, the starting point the starting with tone C in the sixth octave. The melody descants in micro distances that are recorded in cents, and that is emphasized here by red circles. -1, -3, -6, -10, and so on. And the calculation of the required cent amount, Mažulis chose assuming certain note number and cent amount. So -10 means that this number was derived from two summing of 4 and 6. That is the note number 4, and its lower pitch is -6 cents. So this was the idea how to arrange the microtonal next step. So every next cello enters the same pitch C, but at a different tempo that is derived from the previous cello part. And despite every next cello enters with a slower tempo, the total duration of the performance is equal to the first live cello. It means that every next cello part is digitally stretched to the prime cello duration. In total, Mažulis designed a series of 69 notes descending from C6 to C sharp in fourth octave. The duration of the piece was determined in advance when composer chose the starting tempo mark 60. Respectively, it was possible to slow down the tempo up to 1, and in total we get 60 different tempos, plus composer divided value 1 into 10th parts, thus getting in total 69 different tempos. The design of the tempo respectively determined the number of notes. The solipsist score is an example of a strongly technologized process of creation as well as performance. Due to very complicated and strict scores, as I already mentioned, Mažulis has reduced the personality of performer to nearly mechanical state, while the audience also encounters challenges. Also, with the help of the computer, Mažulis is able to operate maximally reduced intervals that are hardly perceptible by ear. In solipse, Mažulis, in his own words, has achieved the maximal purity of creative mind expression, obtaining a highly hypnotic music process. Moreover, the solid architecture of the score has collected inside the diversity of microtonal manipulations from the adoration of unison and refined transitions to overall glissando, forming a micro-dimensional result. And now I would like to play this example, a fragment from Solipse, and I hope you will hear this as well as it was with the Sibylla. So this recording was made in studio. Also, Rytis Mažulis sent me the live recording that the composition was performed in, I remember, in 2019 in UK by Anton Lukashevich, who performed with one cello with 31 pre-recorded samples. But listening to the live recording, we may hear that this intention that was foreseen by the composer, that every note should be very strictly going down according to his recorded sense, in amount of sense, it is really very difficult to achieve by the live performer. So the presented music scores, let me point out some conclusions. Referring to the analyzed scores, I have to say that the most common case of microtonal composing, or let's to say use of microtones in Lithuanian music, is represented with ordinary ornamentation of traditional sounds, adding the intervals smaller than semitones to the well-tempered scale. However, I may distinguish few authors whom I already presented, who maintain a consistent path in creating rationally constructed compositions. Such composers I would attribute to the second type, to the systematic type or structural approach. Besides the provided examples by Rytis Mažulis and Juste Janulite with the integral glissando, I have to mention a very interesting author, Justina Repečkaitė, who deals with microtones as derivatives from spectral scales in wax. While the last presentation today in this session is by my colleague Vytautas Germanavicius, who will comment on some creative adaptation of microtones derived from Lithuanian folk melodies in his own music. So I think that you will get a more overview about Lithuanian contemporary music and using microtones in them as well in listening to Vytautas' presentation. And I would like to thank you for listening, and again, thank you for inviting here to share my research.
Thank you very much, Rima. Yeah, congratulations. I was so much into, I have to avoid this, I was so much into the presentation that I forgot to tell you about the time. We only have 5 minutes actually, and I was writing some notes. I would like to ask in the group if there are any questions. Otherwise, I might go ahead myself. Okay, yeah, the thing is that I was thinking as you were about Mažulis, these comments that he's using microtones as a decorative tool. So it's also in solipse. He means like this?
No.
Yes,
He means that this ornamental or decorative approach is very constant, very common in Lithuanian music, and as I analyzed many scores, yes, it is very typical. But in his own music, he chooses this structural approach when all the composition is involved and regulated by all this, his concept.
Okay, I thought he was also describing himself. I didn't understand that, because also yesterday in the morning, Rafael Ofaus said about Michael Quell's music, described it as a complex microtonal tissue, which is apparently a quotation that Michael used himself. And I haven't heard these days about the word microtonal cluster. I think we are trying to describe, giving different interpretations of what is the microtonal atmosphere, this very small differences in the music. I think we are all, I don't know if Johnny is already with us, it's maybe too early in California. And I don't know, because for me, Solipse, I thought is a huge microtonal cluster, a very nice one. And I really miss myself, my interpretation, of course, as a composer. These microtonal clusters, because it's something that I myself really love it. And I even changed to last night. I changed some words. Excuse me, I'm too excited. I changed some parts of my presentation, my own presentation tomorrow, to include, to make sure I was going to include this concept just to share with you. And then I just see it in the piece Solipse, which I heard actually, I think, in Castelo Branco. I think you were presented something similar. I remember Sibilla and Solipse, very nice composers. Yes.
Yes. And yes, it's right. The word cluster would be very suitable, but I would say that this cluster is achieved using applying the glissando. So that's why I manipulate with the word glissando.
Yes.
For me, it's a huge experiment, an acoustic experiment, as it began with a high C in the 6th octave, and went down in different times to the lower C major, yes, C sharp. And
yes, C sharp.
In the beginning, it was a real cluster in the upper parts, so it was nothing to identify. And then in the middle, where in the structure appeared harmonies. You could hear, the ear could hear several diverse harmonies that vanished in the deeper parts. Then, for in the deeper parts, harmonies could not exist in such density. So the overtones are too far from each other.
Mm.
Yes.
And do you think this is intentional, or this is included in the glissando?
This is how to say, it's intentional, as it was strictly calculated, but it depends already on the idea, not on the intention to create a harmonic sound.
Yes, the concept.
It's a result. It's a result of such a chosen structure that every strict calculation, how to move in which tempo, in which microtones, which sense, amount of sense. So, and the result, yes. And as you,
yes, continue. Sorry.
Yeah, as you mentioned that hearing some kind of harmonies, I somehow remembered was Tom Johnson once created a chord catalog. It was interesting composition that also experiments very simply with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, up to 12 notes in the octave, and then you hear from the very simple result sound, you hear even achieved to the clusters, but also the description of that composition was that this is somehow a catalog that comes from monody to the romantic of 7th chords to the 9th chords up to the modern clusters. So I would say that this is already existing in this cluster inside, and it depends in which part you listen to it, you may hear this.
Yes. Congratulations, Rima.
Thank you,
Great
Rima.
pleasure to have you here. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I'm sorry we will have to move on. We are going now to a presentation by somebody who can kill me. He's next to me if I have if I delay myself too much. I'm just joking, of course.
Don't worry.
Okay, so we are continuing with the second presentation of the second block of the 5th day. So my colleague Johannes Kotschy is going to present the inherent laws of musical scales. Johannes Kotschy, composer, theorist, sound former, and good friend, born in 1949 in Bavaria. He studied pharmacy in Munich, in Germany, as well as piano, chamber music, and composition at the Mozarteum Academy in Salzburg. Since 1981, he's a self-employed composer, freelancer at the Institute for Basic Musical Research at the Mozarteum University, Salzburg. In 1986, he presented the nature tone system developed by himself at the Darmstädter Ferienkurse. He was an initiator of the Heidelberger Naturton Symposia and developed a new keyboard with, which facilitates playing microtones in an easy manner, US and European patent. He founded the Verlegeverband, österreichische Komponisten, together with other composers and dear friends in Salzburg, Klaus Sager, Herbert Grassel, Boguslav Schäfer, Anton Losonci, etc. And was president until 1994 of the IG Komponisten Salzburg, which has been founded by him together with Klaus Sager and Herbert Grassel. From 1998 through 2009, he was president, a good one, of the International Ecumenic Music Society. Currently, it's vice president. Main focus of his musical work: chamber music, choral and orchestral works, opera, music happenings, music for solo instruments, and sound objects, scalophone, sound cube, and so. Since 1985, all works are exclusively in naturton, in nature tone system, based on the 72-step scale of the Symphonic music. Numerous publications about the theory of nature tone music. Ladies and gentlemen, please, Johannes, welcome for your presentation.
Welcome. The presentation will follow at once, or I have prepared it.
Yes, I'm going to present myself the video. Okay, so I will be. Okay, I got it.
Hope you will hear it.
And I'm coming to share the screen. Okay. We're almost ready. Okay.
Dear colleagues, dear guests of our symposium, the dilemma of microtonal music today is the profound disagreement and the question how many pitches belong to a microtonal scale and what's the size of microtones indeed. In the last symposium 2 years ago, I have tried to define the microtone as a pitch of 18 to 17, and it's derived from the whole tone 9 to 8. And the harmonic division of this interval makes 2 intervals, and this is bigger than 100%, and 18 to 17 is the first interval, the first microtone with 99 cents. In a scale, in a microtonal scale, all these pitches have to be smaller than these 18 to 17, and this only can exist in a sequence of pitches, like in melodic flows with microtonal pitches, and it does not exist in intervals. For intervals have to be bigger than 18 to 17, only with the exception of very narrow clusters. Otherwise, we could call any deviation in microtonal form from any interval as a microtonic interval, But this interval is not a microtonic interval. There remain three main reasons to divide an octave in microtonal steps. The first, to receive pitches which represent pure intervals better than V12 Edo is able to produce. The second, to receive altered intervals which could change our habits of pitch perception. And finally, to create new artificial scales or series with the help of an enlarged supply of pitches. But don't be too astonished or disappointed when I have to say that all these intervals already exist in the music systems of the world. In the first part of my lecture, I want to give you an overview of the various scales in the world. And in the second part, I will investigate the corresponding tone systems. We will find there astonishing connections and common features, which finally leads to unique rules of scales and tone systems. First, I want to draw your attention to the difference of pitch supply and tone systems and scales. It's not self-evident, that's the same thing. The pitch supply is a complete collection of pitches which belong to a tone system. The system itself may use two or more pitches for the same position. And the scale finally is a selection of particular tones of a system. This simple C major scale in just intonation shows you intervals which have to be pure intervals, like the fifths and fourths and thirds. But when we have a nearer look at it, we will find out that it's not self-evident that they are pure. This scale could be built of the triads of C major and F major and G major. And then as a product, you see the scale from this. Let me hear that. The C major, the F major, the subdominant, and the dominant G. And together, altogether, that's the scale. It's a tempered scale, but not a just intonation, but it sounds like that. In another wise, we can build the scale with the overtones of C major and F and G. And always we take the number 8, 9, 10. 8, 9, 10, 8, 9, 10. And together, they also build the C major scale. Back to our just intonation scale, it's not so just and pure as aspired. When we look at this interval from D to A, we will find a fifth with the ratio 40 to 27, and that's a rather ugly fifth. It's in German we call it Wolfsquinte, for it sounds like a howling wolf. And you see it's far from real fifth 3 to 2. We could change one of these pitches when we take the smaller whole tone with 10 to 9. When the calculation is right, then we have a 5 to 3 sixth, the A. Otherwise, when we begin with a 9 to 8, with a big whole tone, we will get this 6 here. That's 27 to 16. There are two possibilities for the same pitch. And otherwise, when we make the two whole tones to the third, of course we will get a Pythagorean third. And over from the 10 to 9, 6 with 5 to 3 to this tone, we will get 50 to 27. So we have a just intonation scale, not only with 7, but already with 11 pitches. And when we add the chromatic tones and the 5 chromatics, we will get at least not 12, but 22 pitches. 22 pitches is a pitch supply, and from the pitch supply we take the pitches of the tone systems, and 12, and we use the scales out from these pitch system. Conclusion: a pitch supply contains all pitches of particular tone systems. Scales or modes produced by the system consist of certain pitches which are selected from the tone system. That's it. A particular form is the so-called dodecaphonic music. In this system, the pitch supply has the same number of tones as its tone systems, for they are all equal, they are identical. Scales. At this point we have arrived at 2 elementary questions. First, what's the size of an octave? And second, how many pitches does an octave consist of? The answer is very simple and has to be expected. The size of a scale mainly corresponds to the octave interval. We will get an octave interval by dividing a string into 2 equal parts. That's the whole string, and that's half of it. And we can divide this half and again, and again, and again. And we could continue, but only in theory. They get higher and higher and will never come to an end. But here you will see it's impossible to go higher than that. The octave interval is a simple interval, the simplest interval, and all people in the world will recognize this interval without any musical education, for it's natural. But exceptions prove a rule. There are music cultures in the world which avoid the octave interval, for it's regarded as the same tone as the basic tone. So in a way, the highest cymbal of the Indonesian gamelan instruments is higher than an octave, and the Ari-Ari people on Solomon Islands don't use the octave on the panpipes. And some scales exceed the octave border. So the Makamat, Bayasiras and Humayun in Azerbaijan, which don't use the octave interval. And the Armenian music consists of sequences far than the octave, but they use the octave. And last not least, the Boland-Pierce scale, which has a size of 1.5 octaves, doesn't use any octave. Even the other questions, how many pitches an octave must contain, is very simple to answer. More than a triad and less than 8. A triad is a triad in a decomposition and remains it. We can limit the number of pitches in a scale all over the world from 4 to 7. Most of them are pentatonic or heptatonic scales. Scales with more than 7 pitches, apart from the natural scale with 8 pitches or more, are the just mentioned Boland-Pierce scala and the dodecaphonic 12-tone scale. There's a special reason for that, using of only 7 pitches per octave. We only can memorize 7 different and independent pitches, not more. For it's the same as to to memorize a telephone number with 7 different numbers, or like in USA, where we like very much the abbreviations. The abbreviations should not have more than 5 letters, otherwise nobody could memorize it. And even Arnold Schönberg was wrong when he expected that his dodecaphonic scales could be sung and understood by everybody, and even shoemaker boys would whistle such scales in the streets. And it was impossible. 100 years later, we know that there are not even shoemaker boys anymore, and it's impossible to memorize 12 different pitches without any connection with independent pitches. You are musicians, and I can really hear your protests. You will argue that musicians must be able to memorize 12 different pitches, as Bach and Mozart and all composers use 12 pitches in an octave, but they use it as chroma, as colors, or as to decorate melodies, or as suspension. And the chromatic tones are necessary for modulation to get from one tonality to the other. Tonality, is that old-fashioned? Some believe in atonality, but I don't. When 2 pitches sound together, one of them has to be in the basic tone or a third basic tone, but it's always a basic tone there. That's nature of music. And the nature of music is the physical, the acoustic, and the perceptive reality in music. Let us have now a view on some different scales of the world. It's only a small selection, for there exist more than 1,000 scales and modes in the world. We begin in Africa. You see here is a harp, a Kundi harp. It's been created by the Sande people in Central Africa and belongs to the eldest instruments in the world. In Africa, the northern part is dominated by the Arabian music from the Maghreb to the east in Egypt. But the heart of African music beats in Central Africa. And there the first music instruments had been invented, like the music bow, which is still in use by the San people in South Africa. In figure 1. The just mentioned Kundi harp of the Asanda people represents a further development of a music bow with singular strings and a 5th tone. This is a pentatonic scale already, and with similar pitches arose a hexatonic scale shown in figure 3. The Makua in the Congo Republic had developed a particular pentatonic scales based on harmonic series with the partial tones 4, 9, 5, 6, 7 and 8, figure 4. And in Malawi, musicians use a pentatonic systems of pure fifths like in Chinese music, figure 5. The same region, Uganda, East Africa, also offers pentatonic scales which resemble the Indonesian gamelan tunings with equal distant pitch levels, and evidently the music of East Africa has been influenced by Asian music cultures. This influence seems to be confirmed by equal distant heptatonic scales in Zimbabwe, figure 7, while the heptatonic scale in Tanzania appears as a real just intonation of the Western world, figure 8. Southeast Asia. The music of Southeast Asia prefers pentatonic and heptatonic scales like the slendro and pelok. There exist slendro ensembles as well as pelok ensembles. Mostly the 5 cymbals of a slendro are selected from the 7 cymbals of pelok ensemble, as you can hear it in Mayang Kulit, a well-known Javanese shadow theater, figure 1. The tuning of a cymbals is very different. On Bali Island, for example, exist thousands of slendro ensembles, and none of them resembles another. and there is no difference to the heptatonic P-log ensembles if you compare the tuning of a Surakarta P-log, figure 5, and the P-log of Bremen, Germany, figure 6. On the other hand, the heptatonic scales of Myanmar and Siam, Thailand, seem to be influenced by Oriental music. The Tarkanpur scale of Myanmar reminds of Persian Rast, figure 7, and the P-log of Thailand uses neutral thirds and sevenths in the style of Arabic music, figure 8. China and Korea. The music systems of East Asia are strictly based on the Pythagorean systems. It's built by a succession of pure fifths. The whole pitch supply of China, Japan, and Korea contains 12 pitches, and the characteristic pentatonic scales are built of 7 pitches of a modal scale. The elementary scales used in Japan, Korea, and China are the male scale Ryosen in Japan, Korean Aak, figure 1, and the female scales Ritsusen, figure 2. The scale Inzen, figure 3, with its diminished second, is only used in Japanese folk music. The fine art music for koto uses different pentatonic tunings like the hirayoshi and the iwato yoshi. Yoshi means tuning, figure 5 and 4. An example for a hexatonic scale is shown by the Korean tang-ak with an augmented fourth, figure 6. The same structure, completed to a heptatonic scale with the major sevenths, is the Korean aak, which corresponds to the Japanese ryo and the Chinese main scale, figure 7. The female form, taishiko, diminished seventh, is one of the heptatonic scales in Japanese music and belongs to the chord music gagaku, figure 8. Occidental music. More than 2,000 years, European music was dominated by the Pythagorean scale, figure 1, until the pure natural third came in to create new tunings, which finally led to the 12 equal semitones of an equal tempered scale, figure 2, and a just intonation scale, figure 3. 2 modes only have left from the era of modal systems, major and minor. Figure 4 shows the minor scale in just intonation. Finally, artificial scales complete the slight supply of European scales, figure 5 to 7, that are the whole tone scales and the mystic chord by Alexander Scriabin. The nature tone scale, figure 8, represents the acoustic physical basis of the tone systems. Come to the music system of India. The main tones of the Indian scale are the same as in European Western music. The most frequent are the modes on C, Sa or Shadya, or on F, Ma or Madhyama. Besides the basic tones Sa and Ma and Pa remain unaltered. Together with the Shruti altered pitches, they build the Tatas, the tone material of the Indian scales, figure 3 to 5. Occasionally, alterations of the Ma can be possible, like in Tat Marva, figure 4. Microtonal steps, as to be heard in the early morning raga Gunakuli, are very rarely in Indian music. They are only used in ornaments, figure 6. Oriental music. Heptatonic scales are predominant in the Oriental scales of Arabian and Persian music. There are only very few maqamat, which use one tone less or more. All these systems consist of 7 main tones, like in Indian music. The 5th and 4th are unalterable pitches. The others can be altered in different ways. In Turkey, music is influenced by Arabic scales, like Re-ana Asif, figure 8. On the other hand, the Osman music has been renewed by the modern 53 EDO, which allows a rather precise intonation of its pitches. Certainly you have recognized that all music systems in the world use the fifth and the fourth in their system. And there are three reasons for. The first is in theory, as they are the most simple ratios besides the octave. And the second concerns our hearing. And the third, the practice of music in the early days of mankind. The first music instruments in the world had been built about 30,000 years ago. On rock paintings, you can see human figures hunting with bow and arrow, and perhaps the bow and the string could have been the first instrument. The sound of the strings was amplified by putting it into the mouth. But this instrument shows resonance curves here and has already two strings. So the one tone and its fifth could be heard, and the sound people use a small loop here to alter one of the pitch tones. And so they have the sounds of the basic and the fifth of the same string. At the same time, about 30,000 years ago, the first flute instrument appeared in history. They were found in the Geisenklösterle cave in Germany, a nearly complete flute with 5 finger holes and almost equal distances, and fragments of other flutes. This was an archaeological sensation, for now it was the first time we could hear music of the Stone Age. But the result was disappointing and astonishing at the same time. The music was not much different from the music our days. It was a music in minor, that's all. But after all, this is not surprising, for flute instruments with equal distant holes always produce undertone scales, and undertone scales have intervals of a minor scales. That's all. And the overtone scales, like the bow instrument string and bow string instruments, that's dominated by the fifth, and as the fifth of the undertone series is the fourth up. So the fourth and the fifth are the domaining intervals in music at all over the world. This leads to the following sentences. First, music systems of the world exclusively contain intervals which are taken from nature tone series. Undertone series or overtone series, they contain identical intervals. The smaller the numbers of interval ratios, the more frequent the appearance of these intervals in scales and systems. And apart from slight exceptions, the measure of scales is determined by the interval 2 to 1, the octave. The internal structure of scales is determined by the intervals 3 to 2, the fifth, and 4 to 3, the fourth, which are the result of the harmonic octave division. The fifths and fourths divide the octave in 2 parts, which are symmetric forms with the tonus 9 to 8 in the middle of it. In the classic form of ancient Greek music, the first fourth is called tetrachord, and even the second one continues there. And it's a form of music system that is dominated in all systems of the world, where we find the fourth and the fifth. The chromatic just intonation scale fulfills one important condition of music systems, its symmetric form, and this is derived from its ratios, which have to be complementary ratios. Like here, the 16 to 15 has its relation to 15 to 8. It's just an inversion, a mathematical inversion of its pitch 16 to 15. up, down is 15 to 16. Let's draw it here. 16 to 15. 15 to 16, and that's not a ratio, a real ratio, for it's smaller than 1. So we have to multiply with 2 with the octave. This interval is 30 to 16, and that's 15 to 8. The next condition, that the scale or a tone system has to contain pure fifths and fourths. And when we have a view on it, there are pure fifths here and here, but the fifth, you know, from 9 to 8 to 5 to 3, that's not correct. That's the Wolfskünte in German. And we have other results here. We can take the 10 to 9 or the 27 to 16. This is right and this is right. And the same to the sevenths, it has to be 9 to 5 from 6 to 5 and not 16 to 9. So it's not complete, but it's a very good result for the just intonation scale. And so we can name the system conditions. The first, tone systems may contain any numbers of intervals, but they have to contain their corresponding complementary intervals too. In this way, symmetry is guaranteed. And the second condition, pure fifths and fourths. A tone system is obliged to contain pure fifth and fourth intervals to each of its pitches. Artificial systems like the EDO, however, don't possess neither pure fifths or fourths and other intervals, but only approximations to them. And finally, it turns out that every system in the world cannot possess only pure fifths and fourths. Deviations from the pure fifths and fourths are necessary and have to be in the systems. It's mathematically, it's not possible to get a real pure system that fulfills all the conditions, the symmetry and the pure fifths and fourths. We have noticed that the chromatic just intonation system has a perfect symmetry, but it contains one queer fifth, which forces us to fit it by using different pitch ratios. In the end, there are two particular ratios which define one pitch and the scale apart from the unison and the fifth. The system now consists of 22 pitches, and it seems to be quite similar to the Shruti system of India. In contrast to the Western system, which separates one of the possibilities to describe intervals, the Indian music accepts all these pitches as equal and relates them to the main tones sa, ri, ga, ma, pa, da, ni, sa. The basic Shruti scale, Murkhana, looks like that. The fundamental Shruti scale Murkhana has a perfect symmetry and a remarkable construction. The steps between the Shruti are built of limmas, 256 to 243, that's 90.225 cent. Syntonic commas, that's 81 to 80, or 21.5 cents. And small chromas, the ratio, 25 to 24, that's 70.67 cent. In a precise sequence of commas and the other steps, whereas limmas describe the change to the main tones and chromas to the chromatic tones. Even the presence of pure fifths and fourths is nearly perfect, with only two similar deviations from the ideal configuration, and they are smaller than 10 cents. The Arabic tone system. It was an astonishing discovery to me when I realized that the Arabic music system does not much differ from European and Indian systems. The main difference is the position of the third. The Occidental music differs the major third and the minor third. In India, both pitches belong to the Shrutis of the main tone Ga, Gandhara, But in Arabian music, the main tone sikha is a neutral third between major and minor third. These pitches only are secondary in Oriental music system. Nevertheless, the minor third kurd and the major third busalik are of importance in the building of maqamat, plural of maqam, the scales of Arabic music, which are composed of tetra-like figures with 3 to 5 pitches, the so-called jins in plural ajnas. The Arabic system shows a perfect symmetry. On the other hand, the succession of pure fifths and fourths is slightly interrupted by 3 small deviations of 9.7 cents or 7.1 cents from the pure fifth interval. The Persian dastgah system does not use as much pitches as the Arabic system of maqam, but the manner to create the avase scales out of the 18 pitches of its pitch supply is very similar to the Arabian style. The Persian system too has a perfect symmetry, and the few deviations from the pure fourth intervals can be equalized by adding 4 alternative intervals, like we have done in just intonation scales. The chromatic Chinese tone system resembles the Pythagorean system, which describes a scale as a sequence of pure fifths. The old Chinese principle of yin-yang offers a different solution, the harmony of fifths and fourths. This was a common Chinese tone system, which also is used in Korean and Japanese music. The Chinese chromatic system is not comparable with the 12 Edo systems. Its semitones are derived from the Pythagorean system, which defines 2 unequal semitones. The smaller one corresponds to the interval between the major 7th octave, that's the ratio 256 to 243. This interval is called limma. The other semitone, the upper tom, completes the limma to the tonus, the whole tone, 9 to 8. Although the music of Turkey had been influenced by Arabian music for centuries, the Turkish music has developed a characteristic tone system which can be derived directly from the just mentioned Chinese tone system. It cannot be ignored that the alternating sequences of limata and comma in the Turkish system exactly correspond to the Chinese limma upper tom sequence. Using the commas, 2 for scale tones, the number of pitches in the Turkish tone system amounts from 12 to 17 and gives Turkish music a particular characteristic color. And in addition to that, even the ancient Greek structure of the octave, tetrachord, tonus tetrachord, is still maintained. It has to be added that this scale is the most precise EDO scale in the world, for in this case all deviations from the pure pitches are smaller than 2 cents. The 53 EDO scale also allows to insert intervals of Arabian music, but it has to be considered that this is connected to a loss of precision. In the end, there is nothing left but fascination about the amazing agreement of all different music cultures in the world. Development might have gone into various directions through centuries, but the manner of perceiving music and to recognize particular pitches still has remained the same everywhere. Some of these pitches are preferred by all civilizations, others are reserved to particular cultures. As a whole, they could be able to create a new global music for a global, peaceful society of mankind. That's a dream. But the elements of this music exist already in the pitch ratio of all musical cultures in the world. Put them together in a pitch box and you will notice there are not as much as you would have believed at first. Take these pitches now and start to play. Thank you very much for your attention.
Very good. Yeah. Thank you very much, Johannes. connecting the speakers, the headphones again. Yeah, thank you very much. I didn't want to interrupt the video, of course. We only have 3 minutes left for any questions in the air. 2 new messages. Okay.
But you will
Okay.
continue later.
Yes, of course. Yeah, we have a second presentation today. Any questions? Do I hear? Yes.
Yeah, if I could just talk about harmony and modulation. If you want those elements in your music, then the equal temperament tuning does work well in that particular case. Because that now seems to be unique in Western music, the idea of harmony and maintaining triads in if you modulate to a new key.
Hope we can see that.
Oh, actually, I didn't. Matthew, are you still there?
Yeah. Just trying to make the point that if you want harmony based on triads, then the equal temperament system does work well in that case. And harmony is unique to our Western music.
As harmony, harmony belongs to Western music as we use the pitches of a natural scale and use, for example, in the triad, the natural third, that it's smaller than others, like the Pythagorean scale. And as long as European music could not use the natural scale, which perhaps came from Arabian music, from Andalusia to Europe, it was impossible to sing triads. The first triads had been sung in England in the 13th or 14th century, and very late, in the beginning of the 16th century, this third came to Europe. It was the revolution of the fifth major tone. And this allowed us to build triads and to sing harmonies.
Yeah, thank you very much. I would actually ask, maybe there's a last short question. Otherwise, you can always use the chat box. Johannes will be all day today with us, of course, and tomorrow. So you can ask anytime. Any last question?
Is that a question?
Okay, so thank you very much, Johannes. Wonderful presentation, really well done. Wow. Yeah, so we're gonna move on with the last presentation of this block, and we are coming back to Lithuania again. And Vytautas Germanavicius will present identification of microtonal intervallic relations in Lithuanian vocal and instrumental folk music and their application in music composition. Vytautas Germanavicius, born 1969, graduated from the Lithuanian Academy of Music with a BA and an MA in composition under Julius Liunas in 1996. In 2005, he received an MFA in electronic music from Mills College in Kerrang. Germanavicius was the recipient of the Fulbright Scholarship for Electronic Music and Recording Media Studies at Mills College in USA, 2003. UNESCO Asberg Bursary for Residence at the Banff Center for the Arts in Canada. Elizabeth Mills Crothers Award in Composition from Mills College, USA. The Sir William Glock Scholarship to attend Dartington International Summer Course in 1996, second prize. From the Centrum für Kunst und Medientechnologie at CKM. At the International Competition for Electroacoustic Music Shortcuts, Beauty, Germany. Numerous grants of the Open Society Fund Lithuania, Soros Foundation, to participate in multicultural projects in the Ukraine, Moldova, Mongolia, China, and the Netherlands. In 2001, he was composer in residence at the Visby International Center for Composers in Sweden. Vytautas Germanavicius was president of the Lithuanian section of the ISCM between 1998 and 2005, and artistic director of the contemporary music festival IS Arti in 2001. Participated with the lecture Real-Time Interaction with the Computer in Performance at the Asia Pacific Conference and Festival in Wellington, New Zealand. Germanavicius' works have been performed by prominent orchestras and ensembles from Lithuania and abroad, such as Quarteto Latinoamericano in Mexico, Amstel Saxophone Quartet in Netherlands, Stockholm Saxophone Quartet, Helicon Ensemble in Canada, Kama Ensemble in Sweden, Lithuanian National Symphony Orchestra, Lithuanian Chamber Orchestra, among others. Germanavicius' oeuvre includes music for chamber ensembles, orchestra, choir, traditional instruments, electroacoustic compositions. His works are distinguished by unrestricted stylistic range, balance between intuition and new compositional techniques, particular attention to the sound, color, and search for new performing possibilities. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Vytautas Germanavicius. Good afternoon.
Hello to everyone, and thank you for invitation to this great conference. Now I would like to share my presentation, and my presentation falls in two parts. Yes, and one part is the research project on Lithuanian folk music, and another one is implementation of results into composition. Yes. So my recent study was based on Lithuanian folk songs to determine interval distances in the scale, and to use the results in my recent composition for orchestra. The main source for this research was archival sound recordings from a period between 1930s and 1940s, which could preserve an ancient tunings, unequal pitch distances, microtonality in vocal and instrumental tradition, and possibly change and redefine the structure of the scale in comparison with 12-tone equal temperament. Now a little bit of history. Since the 19th century, in the works of Lithuanian, Prussian, and other scholars, the area of intervallic relations, especially the distances between tones, in Lithuanian folk melodies was not considered very important. However, the German educationist, music theorist Friedrich August Gotthold, who studied the folk tradition of the Baltic region, remarked about the Lithuanian melodies published in Reza's collection in 1825. Quote, "Some tones could have been chromatically altered, and the melodies softened or modified." End of quote. Many transcriptions of Lithuanian melodies were made at the turn of the 20th century, during which time ethnomusicologists and researchers relied on the notational system of a 12-tone chromatic scale and tunings of the church organs. In the interwar period of the 20th century, the famous Lithuanian microtonal composer Jeronimas Kačinskas wrote in his article Prague, the City of Creative Musical Initiatives, quote, "According to some famous musicians of Prague, Orientalism is closer to Lithuanians than the Western European spirit. It is noticeable in the character of rhythm and melody of Lithuanian folk music. If we take a look at our ancient instruments, panpipes, small horns, trumpets, and etc., we will find here the intervals smaller than semitones. It can be assumed that the Lithuanians in ancient times did not know the Greek and German major and minor keys. Here will be the mostly likely influence of later centuries." End of quote. Lithuanian music theorists in the 40s, Jadvyga Čiurlionytė and later Četkauskaitė, noted the need to notate smaller intervals than semitones in Lithuanian folk melodies, and recommended using these symbols: by arrows up and down for notes smaller than a semitone, by a cross for indefinite pitches, and by a wavy line for glissando to the first step in the scale. The other direction besides scale analysis in the 12-tone chromatic system refers to the intervallic peculiarity related to the natural harmonic series, the natural simplicity of frequency ratios between the tones. The musicologist Vytautas, who stated, quote, "The intervals of the perfect fifth and the perfect fourth are very important for the construction of the scale. These intervals of the reference tones form the framework for the entire scale in Lithuanian folk music." In the book On the Way of Sutartinės and Skudučiai, the vocal and instrumental music researcher Stasys Paliulis mentions the Lithuanian traditional woodwind instrument daudytė, which produces the first 5 overtones of the natural harmonic series. In the example above, we can see 5 overtones produced by 2 daudytės tuned in G and A, respectively. Below, you can see a polyphonic sutartinė melody played in 2 tunings, G and F. From a fundamental tone G, it produces 4th, 5th, and 6th overtones of the harmonic series. And from F, only 2, the 5th and the 6th overtone. To begin my study of Lithuanian folk songs and the instrumental versions, I needed first to determine the distances between the intervals in the scale, and secondly, to compare the collected results with 2 temperate systems, natural harmonic series and 12-tone equal temperament. About 100 examples of sutartinės and monodies and their instrumental versions were taken to determine each tone distances in the scale. One of the examples, the clear audible microtone, the monody Fly, Fly, Little Falcon, recorded in 1937. In this recording, which I analyzed at the Sibelius Academy of Music in Helsinki, I had doctoral internship there. By the way, composer Juhani Norvala, he proposed his microtonal instrument, tonal plexus, to identify tones by ear. In this melody, we identify the second degree, with the deviation of about 30 cents compared to 12th tet. It was a bit surprising to notice that the deviation corresponds to the Rast microtone in Magamat Arabic scale. Now we can listen to the song. To measure the distances of the notes in the scale, I used the computer software Melodyne 5, which can detect sound deviations even in polyphonic music audio samples. Here, I present a table of overtone series in an octave for comparison with chromatic 12th tet scale. The microtonal overtones are highlighted in yellow. In identifying the intervals in the scale, I have set a distance limit for detecting microtones of 20 to 80 cents and up to 10-15 cents for overtones, compared to the natural harmonic series. And quote, "However, the choir singers do not hear tone deviations if it does not exceed more than 5 cents singing in unison. The mismatch in 10-15 cents is often felt but still tolerated. This is also a standard deviation for solo performers. From Tenstrom and Sundberg, Intonation Precision for Choir Singers, Journal of Acoustical Society of America." End of quote. Using Melodyne, I made the analysis of polyphonic instrumental song Sutartinė. On the next slide, you can see the collected data. The scale of a song scale degrees, detected interval distances from the reference tone, and interval ratio. I have calculated interval deviations to compare to 12th tone distances and deviations in the scale and made an identification of microtones and harmonics. The numbers in yellow with the asterisk indicate 3 microtonal degrees in the scale, and below numbers in bold with a serial number indicate 2 microtonal overtones. In the scale I indicated in blue, number 23 and number 29. The sonic code of each song was abstracted orally from the scale generated by Melodyne and adopted as original tones of a melody. The sonic code and its sequence of tones do not represent a tonic, as the tones are arranged from the lowest to the highest with a small interval distances in between, to have a clear sonic structure. 2 degrees of a scale was taken into brackets as unsung tones, depending on the algorithm of the computer program that is created to detect the scale of each song. Now I can play this song. 2 green little bitches. And here, analysis of instrumental Sutartine played by 5 horns. And I want you listen and compare to the vocal. Okay. And these instruments are tuned, so this kind of difference with the vocal ensembles, because every vocal ensembles can have some kind of deviations in singing the scale pitches, and instrumental music actually there is tuned exactly the same pitches, but there is differences, the ensemble difference. So I later explain, I compared, I take a like example from the tuned instruments and compared the distances of the scale between vocal music. So in this table you can see the number of overtones with the serial numbers that were detected and calculated when analyzing the vocal and instrumental music samples. I identified the most common 9 overtones and additionally 5 microtonal overtones, numbers 29, 13, 21, 25, 11 in vocal music. For instrumental music we identified 3 microtonal overtones, number 29, 21 and 13, and for all samples commonly used microtonal overtones are number 29, 21 and 13. In this table, I have calculated the summary data of the overtones. You can see that vocal music songs have 6 exactly produced overtones to compare with the natural harmonic series, and for instrumental music, it is 2. It could be assumed that the number of overtones with exact pitch or slight deviations are common in vocal and instrumental music. Thus, the performance of Lithuanian folk music tradition partially reproduced the tuning and interval relations of the natural harmonic series. On the other hand, the constant use of microtones in Lithuanian vocal music was clearly spotted. In Lithuanian vocal and instrumental music samples, there are many ornamented transitional microtones that the program identifies but does not identify as the main tones or recurring sounds, but rather summarizes the common intervallic distances of a song. In many cases, you can find the same pair of degrees in the scale, for example, temperate and microtonal, 2 second degrees or 2 sixths, 2 third or 2 fourth or 2 7 degrees in the scale. This is Sutartinė. We can listen a little bit. To compare the interval distances between the tones, I have divided all songs into 3, 4, 5 or 6 chord structures, according to the number of tones from 3 to 7 in the scales. I selected 3 main intervallic distances detected in the ensembles of horns, tunable musical instruments, based on which all examples were compared. After comparing all the vocal and instrumental music, the scales were divided into 2 groups. The first group has 6 subgroups. The first subgroup corresponding to the first interval distance of horn ensembles, which is very common in Sutartinės and monodies. The second group is stable. It corresponds to the second and third interval distances of horn ensembles and is widely used in all vocal and instrumental music samples. In this slide, you can see identical interval distances of all collected music samples according to the number of tones in the scale. Yellow color indicates Sutartinės, pink monodies, green horn ensembles, blue panpipes, and red kanklis. Dominant interval distances in the Lithuanian folk melodies corresponds to the pentachordic structures of the horn ensembles. The interval distance code of the second group is recognized in 22 Sutartinės, monodies, horn, and panpipes ensembles, and the distance code of the first group, a subgroup, is recognized in the 16 Sutartinės, monodies, and horn ensembles. In the other subgroups, the number of samples is lower of 3, 4, and 6. From the results of the interval distances in the scale, the general interval distance of all vocal and instrumental music can be determined. It is the formula of the second group, 3 quarter tones plus tone, and the formula of the first group, 3 quarter tones plus tone plus semitone. In this research, but different angle, I identified the recurring or popular tones used in performance of the songs. Thus, in Sutartinės examples, the popular or recurring tones are C and F sharp. Then goes second degree microtones and second degree temperate tones. And then the intervals are the 4th, 5th, and the 6th. In monodies, the popular or recurring tones are C and F and B flat. And in all songs, C, F sharp, F, B flat. So from these examples, we can derive a formula for recurring tones C, F, and F sharp, which correspond to the intervals 4th tritone and 5th. To identify the distance between the tones in the scale, I have chosen an amplitude of 25 to 75 cents. for microtonal deviation. Referring to the material of my research, I have selected 7 microtonal overtones from the 8 identified in Lithuanian songs to compose an original microtonal scale. The new scale corresponds to the pitches of 2 natural harmonic series of C and G. Below is a chromatic scale with a common tone of B and unsystematic tone of F. The scale forms 2 pentachords. The pitches of 2 scales, microtonal overtone and 12th tet, are combined to form interval structures. The first interval structure is built on a harmonic structure of 3 tones, the trichord structure, which can be extended by adding further structures or replacing one with another. These trichordal harmonic structures are formed on the following intervals: 3rd plus 2nd, 4th plus 2nd, triton plus 2nd, and the seconds in succession, containing 1 or 2 microtonal sounds. I have also built other types of harmonic structures, a pair of 2 microtonal and temperate pitches. Eight or more tone series with interval distances are varied in pitches, and microtonal glissando formed from a sequence of small intervallic relations. In this slide, you can see 2 score fragments showing microtonal structures of a perfect fourth and the major 7, which form a complex texture of harmonic structures. This piece explores an idea on timbre and harmony and their relationship in musical form. I will indicate 3 types of textures in my piece. The static type of texture is characterized by linear motion with solo motifs, and in the next episode of smoothly passing overtones. The dynamic type of texture is an articulation of musical space that reveals the creation of harmonic tension, the pulsation of musical tissue with fast, accentuated, temporally changing texture. The static dynamic type of texture is characterized by microtonal shifts, transformations of harmonic texture. The realization of this texture network is also represented by instrumental techniques, for instance, tremolo transitions from sul ponticello, sul tasto to the extreme places of bowing, microtonal motion, types of vibrato, harmonics, microtonal techniques. It is important to mention that the modification of the speed of harmony unfolding through different tempos supports the harmonic tensions of the piece. The structure Bloomy Eyes represents a hierarchical system of harmony, type of textures, and degree of harmony progression, which includes pitch amplitude, intensity of textures, and speed of harmonic tension, tempos. The piece begins with a trichord structure from the sound D, which extends to the lowest E of a double bass at the end of the piece. The amplitude of the sound gradually increases from 1 to 5½ octaves. The intensity and tension of the textures depends on the density of a pitch structure. As the register narrows, the degree of intensity increases. As the layers of musical tissue become denser, and conversely, the amplitude increases, the interval distances and tension of the textures decrease. However, pitch amplitude and pitch intensity textures related to harmony and timbre grow in opposite directions. One starts from low amplitude to high, and another from high to low intensity, while the speed of harmonic tension, tempo, and rhythmic intensity have different lines, for example, from low to high and back to low tempo or intensity. When writing a piece, I realized timbre and harmony as 2 separate but interrelated parameters. Thus, the motion of harmonic structures occurs in 2 modes, stable and dynamic. It begins with a stable state with clear harmonies and moves into the dynamic of timbres, unclear moving of sound structures. In this process, the progressions of the chords and the duration of the rhythmic lines transform the harmony into timbre, evoking timbre variations that separate the complex harmonies from the initial trichord structure. It is a growth and expansion of a single sound cell that modifies the change of sound parameters, although the whole piece forms a large microstructure. The implementation of microtones and interval structures in the compositional system was an attempt to transform harmony into timbral sonority, extended sonority, and to experiment with the harmonic progression of timbres in the structure of a piece, finding points where timbre replaces pitch as the primary parameter. In this piece, texture and timbre are closely related, as the timbres have various tendencies for combination and fusion. It is important that the primary selection of initial musical parameters and materials determines a specific set of techniques, a specific group of sounds that unfold the process of timbre transformation. The idea of writing this piece was born in northern Scandinavia. So kind of my imagination, I see the endless desert covered with ice, and under the ice frozen multicolored plants. When the desert is illuminated and warmed by the sun, the underwater's macroscopic processes commands, awaking a fragile life for a short blooming cycle, like a colorful mirage flickering under the ice. For that reason, I created a haiku poem. Frozen multicolored plants sunk in the layers of the northern ice. Through the sun's rays, bloom a second time. This piece, The Bloomy Ice, was premiered at the Baltic Chamber Orchestra's festival, performed by St. Christopher Chamber Orchestra conductor Modestas Barkauskas last year at October. Now we can listen to the fragment of this piece. in my recent piece, Now Titru, a very recent piece written this year for Shakuhachi Flute and String Quartet, I have selected 3 identical scales from 3 Sutartines. The scales F, G, A, B, C are with different microtonality. In this piece, I used quatetones and sextones, so I had to do some changes from the original Sutartine scale. For example, G is A-tone is replaced by G sextone, and minus F sharp sextone is replaced to F sharp plus sextone, and minus A sextone to quatetone, and minus B quatetone to sextone. In this slide, you see a modified sequence of microtones. Microtones of 3 Sutartines are marked in yellow. Below, all 3 Sutartine scales combined in one plus connected to the tones plus semitone scale, and the next tones plus semitone scale with selected microtones. All these scales were connected into one to form 21-tone scale. Modified Sutartine scale is marked in red, the tone-semitone scale in yellow, and additional quatetones in blue. I implemented Sutartine scale in several places of a piece according to these graphics. 3 Sutartine scales have one common sound F plus in a vertical line. 2 Sutartine scales end in horizontal, one scale and its inversion.
1 minute, please.
So here are several places where is implemented 3 Sutartine scale. And that's all. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much.
Jason says, very beautiful, very good. Yes. Yeah, I would like to ask in the group if they have any questions. Otherwise, we can throw everything here. By the way, because now I see Victor Puskar, this instrument, the Daudite, is it
Yes.
to the trombita in the Ukraine?
Yeah. I think trombita is bigger in size, and it has lower tuning, but the ideology is pretty similar. So, Vytautas, do you find some similarity between Ukrainian, Lithuanian, or maybe the folk music of Belarus? I guess we had some strong Baltic influences, especially in the northern Ukraine.
Yes, yes. Thank you. Sorry, Vytautas, I didn't want to get the conversation, the question time to another deviation. Any questions in the group? Yeah, I mean, I think it's really a very difficult task. As you were talking at the beginning, I was thinking, oh my God, it's really a difficult task, such little material to get some conclusions. But then when I understood actually that how I see it, of course, that how poetic that you are actually building a soul for your composition, I find this very, very beautiful. So I understand a lot of work that you have spent apart, extra work that you had to do for your composition to build this soul, and I like this very, very much. It's really inspiring. I mean, it's not a question; it's just a compliment, of course, for this very beautiful work.
Thank you very much. Actually, I started the research 2 years ago, so I didn't know what will come out. But
it's very fresh.
After that, you know, I got some results. So results after another results, and it started.
Wow, huge! I think Hans Gunther has a question.
Just a comment, and thank you very much for this beautiful talk. And I really was astonished how good you could analyze this old, roughly 100 years, I think, old ethnomusicological recordings. So is this Melodyne works really so good?
I would say not so, because I used my ear and piano.
Yeah.
The Melodyne based to detect the scale. So sometimes you hear 4 sounds, but Melodyne shows you 7 or 6. So
Yeah.
some sounds are not.
Yeah, I was wondering. I have not tried with Melodyne, but I have tried to use Audio Sculpt, and of course Audio Sculpt you can look. This takes much of time. You have with the mouse. You have to search for the peak of the fundamental, and it's for more data. It's not suitable, or you sit days and days for to analyze some things, and of course sometimes it depends from the tempo. Sometimes I have recognized that even if you get the fundamental, but for some reason we listen to some psychoacoustical effects to a different pitch than the fundamental might happen.
Yeah, but Melodyne is good that you have a screen and you can check all the sounds, even a noise. So, but Melodyne have a different table when the all data is analyzed. I mean, it's you get a scale. Kind
Yeah.
of. You can analyze also all the material.
Yeah.
So you can compare with this, and of course, I see the pitches, the recurring pitches, are placed in a scale, and not so much performed pitches are not placed in this table. But of course, the performances are different, and sometimes you get different ensembles. So, or the same ensemble perform several times, and sometimes the performers or the singers they perform differently the same pitches. They sing like sixth tone or quarter tone, and another time it's temperate. So it's kind of deviations.
Yes, of course. I think finding the scale is something like to find some most reliable generalization, and that needs, I think, evaluation by humans. I think I so believe that an artificial intelligence or some algorithm can do that better as humans. Or what do you think? I don't know.
Yeah, but I didn't look for like to determine the scale. I just looked for some frequent microtonal pitches.
Okay.
And that's what was my interest.
Yeah.
And of course harmonics.
Yeah.
So and not so much examples of course we have left, because I took the data from before the Second World War. I mean before the 40s.
Yeah.
So
yeah. I know these things we also have in Estonia. We have this from 24. There was a Finnish Finnish researcher made these wax recordings, and
but I think we can get some tendency.
Yeah.
Even
yes, exactly. Yeah.
100 recordings. Of course, we have 2,000 recordings in the archival in the Canon Institute, but I was looking only for that recordings. They have some microtonal aspect in the melodies.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you very much.
We have another question here next to me. Johannes wants to ask you something, Vytautas.
In my opinion, it's not necessary to analyze these pitches quite exactly as they had made, as you told, on wax rolls and old phonographs, and it depends from rotation and other things, and mechanic instruments. It's impossible to translate these records to our days and the possibilities we have. But you could really recognize this three-quarter tone that is used, and that's quite unusual in European music, and that was astonishing me, and it's a great thing, and to possess these records, these wax waltzes that in the wax rolls, and it's a great treasure for Lithuania, and I hope we will find other records of this time. They seem to be, as you said, hundreds of years old and elder. I think it's very archaic music, and and we can keep that to our days, and we are not allowed to lose these treasures. And my compliment to the composition, Blooming Eyes. It was wonderful how you managed to include these intervals and the sounds. It was really a grand and wonderful composition. I like it very much. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Yeah, congratulations. I would like to ask if there's maybe one last question in the group.
Yes. Hello, Vytautas.
Hello.
Nice to see how very nice to hear how your work had progressed. As Vytautas told us, he started this work with me at the Sibelius Academy, and we did indeed analyze some of those songs with Melodyne, and to Hans, actually Melodyne is astonishingly good. So you do get even from such bad quality recordings surprisingly convincing results. And yes, it's true that if you have a distorted recording with 4 voices singing in very unusual intervals, it's a bit of a mess, but it turned out to be, in my opinion, it turned out to be pretty easy to discard the notes that didn't belong, or the extra notes in the. You said that sometimes it detected 7 notes at the same time, even if there were only 4 voices. And just like Johannes said, and hello, by the way, Johannes, we have, it's nice to meet you finally. We have exchanged letters and scores in the past, and I have gotten your best wishes from our colleague Herman Rehberger for Greece, but we and thank you for that, but we never met until now. Yes. But it's true that the ear is essential here, and Vytautas mentioned the microtonal keyboard that I have, the tonal plexus, which in its standard basic tuning, it's 205 tone equal temperament with 205 keys per octave, so that's less than 6 cents per step. So it's a very nice tool to find to listen to music examples and to find by ear what's the right pitch. I also had a student from Jordan who explained, or with whom we looked at Makam music, and she taught me basics of Makam, and she found the pitch, the frequency of the pitch that she found the closest to what she sings in Makam Rast, for instance, the third degree, by by playing adjacent steps on the keyboard, and then finally find this is the one I like. So that's nice to have such an instrument. Anyway, could you tell a little bit more, or maybe I missed how did you derive the complex orchestral music and your harmonies? How they are derived from the folk music scales? Because what you showed were rather complex atonal, quarter tone, pitch class sets, and were they derived from the scale material in some sort of straightforward way?
Yeah, I understand. No, not at all. It was not my intention first, because I didn't know. I didn't want to
Yes.
quote or implement a scale melody of folk music, but in the next composition, the next pieces, I start to implement the whole scale as a kind of sounding material to hear in some places.
Yep.
But in that piece, no. In that piece,
Okay.
it was
Okay, then I didn't miss anything. Yes, but the piece sounded very impressive.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Congratulations for this poetic and very beautiful and great work, or great presentation. And I will see you all in 25 minutes. We're going to have a break to stretch legs.